My fellow Americans, I think we all know where this is going, so let's just skip to the end.
It's only been 2 months. I'm going to try to take you on a journey, my fellow Americans, from a perspective of complete disinterest in politics to viewing Donald Trump as the worst president in American history. Now, I know that's a tall order, and I might have convinced you already that I'm suffering from Trump Derangement Syndrome, but I promise you, this is not from my perspective as a liberal. I am not doing this out of partisanship. I'm not doing this because I'm some left-wing lunatic. This is genuinely my perspective as an American who cares about the rule of law, who cares about the Constitution, and who cares about the rights of my fellow American citizens. But before we have an honest conversation about all of this, we need to discuss what even is Trump Derangement Syndrome.
Here's a new one bound for the DSM, Trump Derangement Syndrome.
Those poor individuals who suffer from Trump Derangement Syndrome.
They call it like Trump Derangement Syndrome.
You have Trump Derangement Syndrome, and I would just like to say to my Republican friends, it's not deranged to fear this.
There are people online who think that the majority of left-wing criticism genuinely comes from a psychological pathogen infecting the minds of people who hate Trump. And funnily enough, there is actually 5 Republican lawmakers from Minnesota who tried to define Trump Derangement Syndrome into law. They wanted to turn it into an actual mental illness, which is insane. Oh, and by the way, one of those lawmakers was actually busted for being a predator. We live in very strange times. And I won't lie to you, there is a kernel of truth to TDS. And I will admit that I genuinely feel incapable of giving Donald Trump an honest consideration at this point. But my goal is to get you to see that perhaps, maybe, possibly, this might come from the fact that he is genuinely just beyond honest consideration. Case in point, would you ever trust Bill Cosby around your wife? In order to do this right, we are going to go all the way back to his first run for presidency back in 2016 and do a deep dive into his campaign against Hillary Clinton. We will compare his messaging, attacks lobbied against the opposition, and what he actually accomplished in office to see, who actually is living in reality. We will do the same for Hillary, and hopefully by the end get a definitive answer for who has Trump Derangement Syndrome, the left or the right. The reason why I'm going all the way back to 2016 and his first run for presidency is that people are going to be much more detached emotionally from this sort of situation. It has been almost a decade since then, and I think that we now may have a chance to genuinely sort of revisit some of the politics of that era from a better point of view. And also, I just genuinely do not want to touch COVID with a 10-foot pole because for some reason it has broken everyone's brain, and no one can talk about it seriously or admit that it had an insane impact on the economy and was the majority of the reason why inflation was so bad, even though everyone wanted to blame it on Biden. And that Biden likely saved us from a much darker economic reality than we actually had because of his policies. But without further ado, it's time to go back to 2016. I want to start by asking you to try to picture in your head what you can remember about each candidate from 2016. What comes to mind about Hillary Clinton? For me, and I'll remind you, I was 16 and in high school when this happened, but the main memorable moments were, 1, the Cedar Rapids meme.
I'm just chilling in Cedar Rapids.
2, that she was the emails lady. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there's vague notions of her being a career politician and the critiques from the left about her deplatforming Bernie Sanders during the primary, but rarely anything positive actually comes to mind. There was not much I had in mind before I started this video of what she actually even, campaigned on or what she fought for, policy-wise. So I think that's a genuine testament to how far back this sort of right-wing framing goes on how we remember things, which was, a wake-up call, kind of a black pill to me when I was doing this video. Trump, on the other hand, was the ultra-giga-chad Mimi edgelord that gave us moments like this.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
He was the drain the swamp guy, the make America great again guy, the famous TV rich guy turned politician. He had a stranglehold on the social zeitgeist of that era and still does to this day to an extent, even though I can't stand the guy. Before getting into any substantive conversation, I want to stress that I'm going to be judging them from what they promised as part of their platform and what they could actually get accomplished and get done through passing a bill through Congress and the long-term solutions that they proposed and things that they actually got done and passed long-term. I will be avoiding the majority of the controversies that they were involved in. I won't be talking much about the Hillary email scandal, mainly because I do want to make a whole video comparing that to the Signalgate fiasco that happened and sort of dig through that whole, problem. And I also will be completely ignoring all of the, horrible character attributes of Donald Trump and all of the controversies that he was involved in, because I think I can make a really strong case just from a policy standpoint and from the actual candidates themselves and their policy positions and their accomplishments in office without having to dig up anything other than what they actually did as president. I will not be talking about executive orders very much or in detail, just because this isn't really the way our government is supposed to work. The president isn't supposed to get things done through executive order, and I think it's time we need to start remembering that this isn't how politics is supposed to work. Mainly because the next president can just undo a lot of the executive orders and changes that they put through, and secondly, it doesn't allow a lot of funding to be taken from, our taxes to actually be put towards these issues. It doesn't create a long-term plan over a long period of time to actually substantively change the problems that we're facing. It's important to remember that a large part of a president's success comes from him using his pressure and the powers that he does actually have to exert pressure on Congress and on people who can actually pass laws so that we create long-term solutions to these problems. He should be able to negotiate and use what's within his powers to actually make change and get laws on the books to solve these problems. Now that we have all of that out of the way, let's look at what actually happened. Choose your character. Donald Trump. Trump's 2016 platform relied on the perception that the government was a swamp that needed to be drained. That's where we get the lovely line of drain the swamp.
We are going to drain the swamp.
He sold the vision that we could get rid of all of the career politicians and we could get the people out of government who cause all of the backup and the bureaucracy and the problems that real Americans face, and we could actually get real change in the government. The primary target for all of this ire was none other than Hillary Rodham Clinton.
Crooked Hillary.
His primary political opponent. He really focused on getting back base manufacturing to America and using his status as a businessman to claim that he was what the country needed to actually fix our economic problems. The big scandal of this election was the infamous deleted emails in Hillary's private email server, which he took every single opportunity to mention every debate and every time he got a chance to.
There has never been anything like this where emails and you get a subpoena. You get a subpoena, and after getting the subpoena, you delete 33,000 emails.
His main appeal was that he was on the other side of politics, that he didn't have to do this. He understood the tax code and how people took advantage of it in order to bring the real change.
Life was a lot easier on that side. I didn't have to do this.
He was willing to put down his wealth for the betterment of the country. Now, it's completely impossible to talk about Trump without mentioning his three major policy positions of the 2016 run, which were 1. Building the border wall, 2. Repealing and replacing the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, and 3. In his words, the biggest tax cut since Reagan. He was very charged about the border and the influx of refugees and, I quote, wanting to ban all Muslims until we figured out what's going on. I will include the full clip for context because a lot of people try to claim that he never said this, but you can judge for yourself what he meant.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on. We have no choice. We have no choice.
He also very much opposed NAFTA, which was the North American Free Trade Agreement, and made a big deal about how he could fix it and make it much better, claiming that it was the worst trade deal in history and that he could make a much better trade deal with our partners of Mexico and Canada. This is very important. Don't forget about this part. He wanted to change NAFTA during his presidency. Remember this. He made sure to call out America's national debt, wanted to enforce a 5-year ban on all government officials after they leave office, decrease the corporate tax rate from 35% to 15%, get a constitutional amendment to add term limits, and listed a whole host of issues and attacks against Hillary, which included but weren't limited to Hillary being the most corrupt person ever to run for office. Funny. Claiming the email scandal was worse than Watergate. Funny. 2017 will be the year that America lost its independence if they lose, which is really rich coming from Trump. Lots of fake news claims and corruption in the media, and he also made a big deal about this being the final chance to save the Second Amendment. Real quick, before we move on, I just want to point out some really funny moments from the campaign rallies that I saw when I was researching for this video. This was just hilarious watching this, and I wanted to share. The first clip, someone screams, "She's the devil," talking about Hillary during one of his rallies, and it's just the funniest thing ever. Watch.
And open borders, there goes your country. Simple as that.
Another thing is that he even mentions in this very campaign rally that he loves mail-in ballots and that he wants people to do mail-in voting and thinks it's a good idea. Like, watch.
And while I'm at it, make sure you mail in those ballots before Election Day. Early voting starts on the 24th. Got to mail them in, but get there November 8th.
And also, this one's really funny as well. He says that being at a Trump rally is the most fun you'll ever have.
Is this the most fun you'll ever have, right? Right? Being at a Trump rally. Being at a Trump rally. There's nothing better.
Okay, so let's talk about actual accomplishments in office. We won't be able to do this for Hillary because she lost, obviously. Luckily for Trump, we can actually take a look at what he got done in office and what we can expect from a Trump presidency and how he handled fulfilling his promises during his campaign trail. So, what did his time in office actually look like? If I had to choose a single word to describe it, failure would be a great fit. This video is already going to be quite long, so I'm not going to do a complete breakdown. I'm just going to run over a majority of his campaign positions and how they went. If you want to fact check me or look it up yourself, I will include any links I used in the description of this video. And I encourage you to actually look at the Wikipedia page of his first presidency, which I hear you. I already can tell you're going to, be mad at me for being a Wikipedia warrior, but genuinely, it had over 1,000 sources for its amalgamation of his entire first presidency, and this thing is so long. It just goes on and on and on. But for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to briefly touch on some of the main points of his first presidency. A majority of his time in office was spent just trying to go after the FBI and the DNC and investigating Hillary Clinton, firing the director of the FBI, James Comey. I think James Comey. I could be wrong, I'll correct myself later, not passing any legislation that he promised in his campaign. He did not get term limits passed for the Senate or the House. He did not get the border wall built, despite declaring a national emergency to get it done. And Mexico definitely did not pay for any of it, even the small portion that he did get finished, failed to repeal and replace ACA, which was a major policy point of his and was a huge failure because, thank God, John McCain voted no. And it's important to remember the only reason this didn't get passed was because they had no replacement. They were just trying to get rid of it, which would have been horrible. Millions of people would have lost their health care, and it would have gone back to a time where insurance companies could deny people for pre-existing conditions. Funnily enough, in the 2024 campaign, this was what gave us the famous, "I have a concept of a plan."
So just a yes or no, you still do not have a plan?
I have concepts of a plan. I'm not president right now.
He still doesn't have an idea of what he wants to do. There was a lot of deficit spending, and he added massively to the national debt during a time of economic growth for the country. Obama was deficit spending to try to save us from the 2008 financial crisis and to avoid a continued recession. The 2020 spike was obviously from the pandemic, but Obama reduced his spending in his second term when the economy started to recover, only for Trump to massively balloon it again while we are already in an economic upturn. Now, there were two major wins for his presidency that I want to mention. It wasn't all bad: the massive tax cuts he promised and the renegotiation of NAFTA. But even those two things fall flat when you look into them. The massive tax cuts were only for the rich and the top earners in America, which is about to sunset, which is why you see all of this massive gutting of our, programs and stuff, and Doge trying to, scrape together money to pay for this massive tax cut. And the trade deal that Trump supposedly fixed, that he was very proud of during his first presidency, he's now throwing it out the window to start a trade war with Canada and Mexico over tariffs for what? Half an ounce of fentanyl coming across the border? This is insane. He either has to admit that the original trade deal he made was bad and he's trying to renegotiate it for some reason, or the original trade deal was a good deal and he's just doing these tariffs for fun. It just doesn't make any sense. Nothing from his first presidency seems to have mattered at all. It was all theater. You got almost nothing if you voted for him in 2016. It makes you question what his intentions for running for office actually were. But what about his competition? Maybe Hillary wouldn't have been any better. Maybe she was also just as bad. So let's find out.
Choose your character. Hillary Clinton.
Hillary's 2016 platform was mainly focused around lifting up the middle class through investments in advanced manufacturing jobs, STEM, and, in her words, creating a 21st century superpower around clean energy.
I want the United States to be the clean energy superpower of the 21st century.
Bernie Sanders' primary campaign largely popularized the idea of free tuition, and Hillary stole some of that thunder by promising people making under $125,000 a year free college tuition, and anyone making over that much would have debt-free college.
Public colleges and universities should be tuition-free for everyone who makes less than $125,000 a year. And they should be debt-free for everyone else because nobody should go into debt.
She did spend time talking about equalizing gender pay and talking about having women being paid more, but honestly, looking back on it, she spends nowhere near as much time talking about that as she does her ideas for lifting up the middle class and investing into American economy and trying to, bring us into clean energy and have an actual vision forward for America. I was genuinely surprised, and I recommend you should watch her old campaign videos in 2016. Watch one of her speeches and let me know what you think. She really doesn't spend any time on vote for me because I'm a woman as much as the media would like you to believe. Interesting. I wonder if the Republican Party has used a similar tactic in 2024 against Kamala Harris.
Do you believe that Vice President Kamala Harris is only on the ticket because she is a black woman?
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black.
What I want to ask you about is what he said last month. He suggested that you happened to turn black recently for political purposes. And he...
Same old tired playbook. Next question, please.
That's it?
That's it.
Another interesting policy that I fully support is that she wanted a universal pre-K for children to be able to be prepared for school. She preached that the American dream was big enough for everyone, promising to increase technical education in high schools, create more community colleges, more apprentice programs, and increase the minimum wage. She also promised to increase taxes on the wealthy, which she said she would not touch anyone making over $250,000 a year, and she promised tax cuts on smaller businesses. She overall seemed to have a very sensible idea for how the economy should be run. It was really weird seeing her actual policy positions losing to Donald Trump in 2016. There are a few more things worth mentioning that she ran on that I think are important to talk about. One is climate change. She very much was a proponent of pushing for, awareness of climate change and getting more scientists and more people to be pushed towards environmental protection and that sort of thing. The criminal justice system reform. She wanted to reform the criminal justice system. She agreed with Trump. They did talk about this in one of their debates, that they both thought that there needed to be some sort of reform for criminal justice. The next point is protecting Social Security and Medicaid, which even in 2016, there was talk about the Republicans cutting it, which it's funny that we're there now. Anyway, another big policy position that Clinton ran on that completely took me by surprise that I did not remember or know about because, well, I didn't really pay attention during 2016, but she was running for overturning Citizens United in the Supreme Court.
I think the current court has gone in the wrong direction. And so I would want to see the Supreme Court reverse Citizens United.
Which is extremely interesting, considering that this was literally the court case that, put money in politics, right? This was the court case that people who maybe would have wanted to support Trump would see her as being the better choice for. Since we don't have the ability to actually look at what she accomplished in office because she lost, I want to talk about her predictions of Trump and what she said a Trump presidency would look like and see how those predictions stack up. Evaluating her predictions of his behavior, I think, is the best way to see if she had an accurate worldview. After all, the best way to tell if someone is correct is to see if they can make predictions of future outcomes. So, again, we're trying to figure out who has a better view of reality here. Her first big claim was that Trump was against scientists, specifically in relation to climate change. This, in my view, is 100% accurate. It's undeniable. He put someone in charge of the EPA that completely denies climate change.
My name is Myron Ebell, and I'm
leading the Trump transition team on environmental matters is an avid climate change denier, a man who was once funded by the tobacco industry to fight those seeking to further regulate cigarettes.
The people he put in office currently refused to include climate change as a national security threat in their report to Congress when it had been included every year prior.
One note that surprised me, I've been on this committee now this is my 13th year. Every single one of these reports that we have had has mentioned global climate change as a significant national security threat, except this one. Has something happened? Has global climate change been solved? Why is that not in this report? And who made the decision that it should not be in the report when it's been in every one of the 11 prior reports?
I can't speak to the decisions made previously, but this annual threat assessment has been focused very directly on the threats that we deem most critical to the United States and our national security.
The way his administration handled his attempt to overhaul NOAA is what helped spark a massive protest, the March for Science, which I actually attended in 2017, which people protested his views against science and the fact that he was just blatantly denying climate change and putting people in roles of government that did not respect the fact that climate change exists. It's real. It's undeniable. I'm sorry if it upsets you, but the climate is changing and we are the cause of it. Another thing she said that she got a ton of flack for back in 2016 was that there wouldn't be a peaceful transfer of power. Now, we know 100% sure that this was an accurate prediction. We didn't get to see it play out in 2016 because he won, unluckily, but he still to this day refuses to admit that the 2020 election was fair, that the 2020 election was not rigged and that he lost fair and square. And he tried for months and months leading up to the election, as well as years after, claiming that the whole thing was rigged. He literally had a conspiracy to coup the government during January 6th. And no, I'm not necessarily talking about the insurrectionists that stormed the Capitol. That was another problem. What I'm talking about is the false slate of electors he sent from several states to try to certify him as the president, and he would get J.D. Vance. Pence. It's a good question. Why did he need a different vice president? Maybe you should look into that. Why is his vice president different? But Mike Pence, his original vice president, refused to certify Donald Trump as the president because he knew that this was unconstitutional and that this was just a ploy for him to stay in power, that it was illegal, it was horrible, it was a complete bastardization of our Constitution, and it's just insane that this happened. This is all documented. This is very well known. In fact, Donald Trump would be in prison right now for all of this if he did not get elected president, because all of the cases were suspended when he got elected. It's very clear Hillary was spot on the money saying that there would not be a peaceful transfer of power if he lost. He does not lose well. Another big prediction from Hillary that came to fruition was that his Supreme Court picks would overturn Roe v. Wade.
Now, Donald has put forth the names of some people that he would consider. And among the ones that he has suggested are people who would reverse Roe v. Wade.
This one is hilarious to me because everyone saw this coming. Everyone was saying that this was an over-exaggeration of the left and that this would never happen, that this was ridiculous. Every single Supreme Court pick, when they were, having their confirmation hearings or whatever by Congress, they were asked if they would respect the stare decisis of Roe v. Wade, and they all said, yes, we will respect the decision and we will not overturn it. And yet they did. They still overturned Roe v. Wade, and it happened. Just like Hillary said it would.
Can you tell me whether Roe was decided correctly?
Senator, again, I would tell you that Roe versus Wade, decided in 1973, is a precedent in the United States Supreme Court. It has been reaffirmed. The reliance interest considerations are important there. And all of the other factors that go into analyzing precedent have to be considered. It is a precedent of the United States Supreme Court. It was reaffirmed in Casey in 1992 and in several other cases. So a good judge will consider it as precedent of the United States Supreme Court, worthy as treatment of precedent like any other.
Senator, I said that it's settled as a precedent of the Supreme Court entitled to respect under principles of stare decisis. And one of the important things to keep in mind about Roe v. Wade is that it has been reaffirmed many times over the past 45 years.
I have no agenda to try to overrule Casey. I have an agenda to stick to the rule of law and decide cases as they come.
They just lied to everyone's faces and overturned it anyway. So it's wild. The final point I want to talk about that again got massively blasted as Hillary overreacting and being divisive was that Donald Trump was attacking democracy itself. She said this back in 2016 and everyone laughed it off. They called her insane for saying that, for having these concerns. They said that she was nuts for suggesting that it would be, horrible or whatever. And everyone said that the Democrats were turning up the temperature or being too divisive or overreacting or being dramatic. We are now facing a serious constitutional crisis that America hasn't seen since Andrew Jackson. For context, to get through to you how bad this is, when Andrew Jackson refused to listen to the Supreme Court, just like Donald Trump is gearing up to do with ignoring these TROs, with creating these absolutely insane arguments in court for why he should be respected, and these insane executive orders that keep getting challenged and stopped, is that when Andrew Jackson did this, it ended with the Trail of Tears, one of the worst moments in American history. That's where we're headed. That's who Donald Trump is acting like right now. That should be a massive red flag and cause all the fire alarms to be going off in your head right now. And what's even crazier is that Trump and his allies, his friends or whatever, they actively idolize Andrew Jackson. They talk about this openly. It's not even a hidden thing.
I think that what Trump should do, like if I was giving him one piece of advice, fire every single mid-level bureaucrat, every civil servant in the administrative state, replace them with our people. And when the courts, because you will get taken to court, and then when the courts stop you, stand before the country like Andrew Jackson did and say the Chief Justice has made his ruling, now let him enforce it.
Now, before I burst into tears over my grief for Harambe, let's go back to the future. Now that we're finally back to the present, let's take a look at what Trump is doing in office now. He is signing a flurry of executive orders that most of which are unconstitutional, and they're being challenged in court left and right. He's constantly being taken to court over his absolutely insane abuse of executive power, and it seems that the court is literally our only hope at bringing this to an end, as Congress and the Republicans who are supposed to be representing their constituents just sit back and let him take all the power that he wants. And it doesn't help that the Democrats like Chuck Schumer and Fetterman are just laying back and playing with yarn balls like kittens. And on top of this, you have all of the insane public quid pro quos that the president is doing with the mayor from New York, as well as the personally naming law firms in his executive orders that are now just caving and doing pro bono work for the president to get out of being restricted from getting into the federal buildings and that kind of thing. It's insane. Just everything just keeps getting worse. You have all of the deportations that he's doing, which a lot of them are actual doomsday scenario where they're not getting any due process. They're taking people who are legally here and they're just shipping them off to El Salvador. It's so hard to believe that this is all happening at once, and people are just turning a blind eye and making excuses for it. You have all of the talk of him about threatening allies like Canada and Mexico. We've heard more about him talking about invading Greenland and threatening Canada with tariffs than we have about his, plans for fighting China or Russia. In his peace negotiations with Zelensky, he talks more toughly to Zelensky and demands more from him than Putin, the person who actually started the war. He claimed that Ukraine started the war. This guy is actually spreading Russian propaganda as the president of the United States. It's wild. Speaking of Canada, you have all of his horribly insane tariffs that are on and off and on and off, and tariffs upon tariffs upon tariffs, causing the economy to crash. This is insane. The stocks look horrible, okay? It's so comical that the guy that people elected to fix the economy is just running around with a hammer, smashing everything. And you also, talking of smashing everything, we have Doge and Elon Musk, the richest person in the world, who puts George Soros to shame for what he's doing in the government. But he's just running around smashing all of these agencies, causing huge fuck ups, and it's so unfathomably stupid, the way they're just going around and carelessly cutting everything. They're cutting veterans' benefits. They're cutting actual necessities for our soft power around the world, like cutting U.S. aid. When you list everything back to back like this, it's just what has the guy done well? It just seems like he's hardcore sprinting for something. He's going for something. What is he actually doing? That's the question I'm trying to pose with this whole Trump derangement syndrome question. I need to understand who actually has a grip on reality, because to me, it seems like I'm not going insane. It's the people who are brainwashed into believing this stuff is okay that have Trump derangement syndrome. And last but not least, we have to talk about the royal fuck up of the Signal controversy, of leaking classified information to a journalist by accidentally dragging him into a private conversation. This stuff isn't media lies or fake news or, any of the corruption of media. This is stuff the administration is confidently boasting about or just ignoring. If this doesn't send alarm bells ringing in your head, what would? Just listen to what the DOJ is currently arguing in court.
The fact is that individual plaintiffs were able to file habeas in time in order to secure relief.
Wait,
And
what
with this
individual
court,
plaintiffs were?
the 5 individual plaintiffs that
That's
got,
not my question. My question is there were a lot more people. They wanted to bring a class action. They had to have some named plaintiffs. So if 5 people filing habeas doesn't help everybody else on 2 airplane loads. Correct? And my question to you is, and you said those 5 didn't get put on the airplanes. So as to the 2 airplanes that I think you just agreed involved removals solely on AEA grounds, on Saturday, the very short time of the proclamation's publication, had no opportunity to file for habeas or even notice as to the grounds on which they were being removed. Am I wrong about that?
I think so, Your Honor. The fact that 5 individual plaintiffs did file habeas and did get relief indicates that they could.
I don't think you're answering my question. My question is not as to the 5 plaintiffs. How much time, I want you to think of 5 other people on the first airplane. How much time when were they given notice that they were being removed under the AEA on the grounds that they were members of Trinity Arqua? And how much time were they given between that notice and being put on the airplane that Saturday, right after the proclamation was signed, to file a suit?
Your Honor, those facts are not in the record, and I don't know all of them offhand, but I think.
Okay, so go ahead, you think?
But I think the fact that 5 individuals were able to do so indicates that others could have.
They filed suit before the proclamation was even published. I've asked you after the proclamation was published. And I assume these habeas actions that you're talking about, and correct me if I'm wrong, that are now being filed in Texas, have been filed since there's been a stay.
But Your Honor, I'm talking about
right?
the 5 individual plaintiffs in this case.
That's not my question.
I understand.
The question here is, if someone thinks there was a meaningful opportunity, notice and opportunity to file for habeas for the people on those 2 airplanes, which are not these 5 named plaintiffs, because they filed before the proclamation was even published. If there was no opportunity for those folks to file habeas, then that's the issue for the TRO, to freeze things in place so that compliance with due process can occur.
No, that is not how this works. And that is not how the DOJ should be arguing in front of a judge. This is insane. We need to put a stop to this. And we need people on the right as well as the left to see this as the problem that it actually is. This is why the people who support Trump are the ones inflicted with Trump derangement syndrome. Any one of these things individually should be disqualifying from office, but they aren't. This is why the people who support Trump, they have warped reality around their worldview of worshiping Donald Trump to the point where it's causing real harm to our country. And we need to fight back. We need to work on getting these people out of this horrible media environment. I mean, just the stuff I just listed before, excluding January 6th, is so much. It's so much. And the fact that this people are just okay with this, that they just brush it aside or aren't aware of it. It's really bad and it needs to stop. So the primary goal should be getting them out of political power. We need to get people in office who have further left views. They just need to be more left. And that needs to be the goal. We need to mobilize. We need to work together to get this stuff out of our country. If you did actually watch all of this video, and I hope that you will and that you did, think about how many times you disagreed with me in this video. Think about how many times I said something and I, talked about an issue or a problem, and how many times you had to tell yourself, oh no, that's a lie. Oh no, I know the problems with this. Oh, I know. Think about the likelihood of every single one of these examples being wrong. And again, I will bring back Bill Cosby into the picture, because with Bill Cosby, at a certain point, it became like, there are so many allegations against this guy. Like, even if most of them are false, he's still a really fucking terrible person, right? Like, even if, like, 50 of the allegations against him were complete bogus, once is bad. Once is bad enough, okay? And the fact that there were that many just makes it 60 times worse. So, I want you to apply the same kind of thinking to Donald Trump. Maybe, yeah, maybe I am over-exaggerating. Maybe I do have it all backwards. Maybe I'm completely brainwashed and most of this stuff is wrong. But if just one of these things is right, or just a few of them are right, then maybe you shouldn't be so allegiant to Donald Trump as he demands you to be. Maybe you should start to question if there isn't people better suited to govern this country. If there aren't people who care more about your issues and who care more about you as a person and who care more about helping the economy and bringing the working class back into a position where they can actually afford everyday life. Maybe he's the one who's lying. I just want to stress that I'm not coming at this as a perspective of MAGA necessarily being bad or deplorables, right? But I am coming at this as a perspective of Donald Trump being a deplorable. And he's using you, and he does not care about you. And all of these policies and problems and issues and massive things that I've been talking about in this video should be proof that he doesn't actually care about being president or solving political issues. He just wants to be in the public spotlight. He wants to be remembered. He wants to make a name for himself, and he wants to do things that cement him in American history. That's why he renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. Like, he doesn't actually care about fixing these issues. None of these policy issues that we've talked about so far was him fixing the economy. It was all just kind of nothing. And that makes you question what his motivations are for presidency. Why are we here? What is he even doing? Why is he in office? Those are good questions to ask. I want to end this video trying to reach out to you as an American. Our country is under attack right now, and it's not DEI, it's not the Democrats, it's not the deep state, it's not this, it's not immigrants, it's not the LGBTQ, it's by fascists. It's by people who want to concentrate power in the executive branch in order to exploit our government for their own financial gain. People like Elon Musk is a prime example of what's actually wrong with our country right now. He's using the presidency in order to enrich himself. And so is Donald Trump. And so are all of the other people in his office. They're trying to push for policies that don't help people. They don't help you. They don't help me. They help themselves. And that is blatantly obvious with how they are prioritizing their tenure in office. Most recently, Donald Trump wants to go for a third term. Why would someone who respects the Constitution and who respects the values of our country even joke about something like that? Our entire history of our country was founded on the idea that our first president gave up the power of the presidency. He said, no, we founded our country not to be kings, that we wouldn't repeat the mistakes that other nations made by forcing the people into office long enough that they just became dictators. We can't do that here. There is too much riding on our downfall. It's time to wake up, people, and it's time to join the fight for our country because it's already coming for you. Your Social Security is on the line. Your rights are on the line. The rule of law is on the line. Democracy itself is on the line. Get involved in your local Democratic Party. Even if you are on the right, even if you're a Republican, I implore you to try to talk with people who are in the Democratic Party. I promise they will be more welcoming in person than they are online. People in real life are nowhere near this sort of degenerate, horrible, caricature that you get on the internet. Real people are welcoming and kind. And for those who are already on my side, go to protests, sign up to Canvass, make phone calls to your local representatives, sign petitions, donate to campaigns, whatever you can do, do it. Start conversations with people. Speak up. Don't be afraid to make things political. It's not cringe, okay? It's not something that isn't polite or isn't normal. We need to talk about these things. It's time to make people uncomfortable because we're living through uncomfortable times. We need to push for change. If they don't want to hear it, if it makes them uncomfortable, maybe they should get up and do something about it. Every bit helps. And no matter how small your contribution is, realize that it is enough. The fact that you chose to do something is enough. Thank you so much for watching, and if you did enjoy the video, make sure to leave a like as well as leave a comment for some feedback on my channel because I'm really trying to grow and improve my messaging to try to reach as many people as possible. Any kind of criticism helps. I really do enjoy it, even the negative comments. And if you want to be a part of my community, make sure you join my Discord server. There's a link down in the description. And be sure to check out my Substack if you would like to see some of my other content. I'm trying to work more on writing. I've been very focused on video creation lately, but I'm hoping to get much more content pushed out there as well. But again, thank you so much for watching. And as always, thank you for your time.